Good day, we are the group number 2 researchers and our research was entitled Discriminatory Behavior Experience Among Filipino Chinese Living in the Philippines During the Pandemic. As the first presenter, I will introduce our group member first. I am Custodio Angel May, the next one is Gonzalez Lisel, Hernandez Roniña, Lazaro Giovanni Cristi, Ontivero Sharanica, and Maria Lalaine Vergara. We all know that when the pandemic started, people start to put the blame on Chinese people. And because some of them are living here in the Philippines, or also known as the Filipino Chinese or Chinoys, they shoulder all the criticisms and discrimination that happened during the pandemic. As the slide shows, according to Rusite et al. 2002, discrimination is already at the human society, or in short, it was happened on the past events. As APA 2019 said, discrimination is treating people unfairly because of generalized characteristic or being belong in group with different ethnicity and tradition. It is somehow said that physical appearance is also one of the reasons why a people or group of people are being discriminated, like skin color, hair, or something that you might be different from another person. And in this research, we will try to know if there is some underreported cases of discrimination of Filipino Chinese in the Philippines.
Statement of the problem. The main problem of the study is to know the discriminatory behavior experienced among Filipino Chinese living here in the Philippines during the time of pandemic. It especially seeks to answer the following question. What is the demographic profile of the respondent in terms of age, gender, socioeconomic status? Second one is what are the discriminatory behaviors experienced by the Filipino Chinese? Third one is what are the factors contributing to the discriminatory behaviors experienced among Filipino Chinese?
In this part, which is the theoretical framework, our group used the aversive racism theory. According to Gator and Video 1986, this theory deals with being subtle and ambivalent attitude, but it is more focused on the ambiguities. This theory is also stated that those individuals get to avoid the situation or events when they know that they will make an interaction with different minority groups.
So about our conceptual framework, as you can see in the figure 1, it is different from the usual conceptual framework that has only two boxes, which is the independent variable and the dependent variable, because we use the concept input process by Joly and Bolitho. So the content is social identity theory that is Henry Tajfel contributed in 1979. According to it, it gives them a sense of social identity when their self is based on groups that they belong to. There's two categorizations. So the in groups, which is us, and the out groups, which is them. And the input or the independent variable in the usual format of research is knowing the discriminatory behaviors experienced by Filipino Chinese. So this is from our SOP. And lastly, the process or what we call the dependent variable is the title itself, the discriminatory behavior experienced among Filipino Chinese living in the Philippines during the pandemic. So about our conceptual framework, as you can see in the figure 1, it is different from the usual conceptual framework that has only two boxes, which is the independent variable and the dependent variable, because we use the concept input process by Joly and Bolitho. So the content is social identity theory that is Henry Tajfel contributed in 1979. According to it, it gives them a sense of social identity when their self is based on groups that they belong to. There's two categorizations. So the in groups, which is us, and the out groups, which is them. And the input or the independent variable in the usual format of research is knowing the discriminatory behaviors experienced by Filipino Chinese. So this is from our SOP. And lastly, the process, or what we call the dependent variable, is the title itself, the discriminatory behavior experienced among Filipino Chinese living in the Philippines during the pandemic.
Scope and limitations. This study will investigate the discriminatory behaviors and the factors contributing to this that a Filipino Chinese experience here in the Philippines during pandemic. One of the factors that hampered the ability of the researchers to conduct the study was their inability to find the necessary participants. The participants of the study will be the Filipino Chinese living here in the Philippines. They are chosen as prospective participants due to survey questionnaires online and with the use of social media platforms such as Facebook. Google Form versions of the instrument will be utilized in gathering the participants of the study. This will be posted among Filipino Chinese group pages on Facebook, and through this, the researchers will be able to ensure that all the participants will receive the instrument.
And now let's proceed to definition of terms. Aversive racism. It's a form of racial prejudice against a particular group, although the aversive racists regard themselves as supporters of equality. Discriminatory behaviors. A person is being discriminated because of their age, disability, race, and etc. Filipino Chinese. One of the group of people in the Philippines that is chosen as the respondents in the study. Hate crimes. The criminal offense of the perpetrator of physical assault or abuse verbally the victim directly to the victim's perceived race, religion, or sexual orientation. In-group. The group to which we belong. Out-group. The group that is not included in the in-group and being described as different from others. Segregation. Excluding members of a racial group from access to institutions and resources that they, the racist, think is not favorable to them. Social identity. Their self is proportional to the physical, social, and mental characteristics of the group that they belong to. Verbal antagonism. It's a form of hostility that disparages racial comments to a certain target. And now let's move forward with review of related literature. Discrimination. When someone faces discrimination, their civil rights were deprived from them because other people are being legally protected from being discriminated in the domains of race and gender. Kohler-Hussman, year 2018, emphasized that discrimination is a thick ethical concept which determine where the actions are applied, and therefore concluded that in order to discover which action is discriminating, action's distinctive wrongfulness needs reasoning by using references that makes up which categories it concerns. Discrimination is as old as the human society. It is when you treat a people or groups with prejudice and unfairly based on generalized characteristics. Oftentimes, minorities are the targets of discrimination, but majorities can also be discriminated. Discrimination opposes long-term assimilation prospects, and the full participation in society is hindered. Also, discrimination has a harmful effect on the health of outcomes of affected population, not just the human and civil rights offense. As the action-related components of the stigma process, discrimination is regarded too in the broader setting of stigmatization. Work discrimination. Discrimination and issues of employment diversity are significant topics today in industrial and organizational psychology, business, and human resource management. Both women and black people have been struggling with so many difficulties ever since civilization began. Industrialization asks so much from the society, and the working conditions are something that lacks sympathy towards the workers. Kakmak year 2019 argued that preferential hiring is something that can't be a compensation and that can also lead to another discrimination against equally qualified white males. Racial discrimination. Social subsets are the things needed in settling one's status in society. The degree of discrimination one experiences was due to having something in common in race. Racism, as a dominating form of oppression, enlightens the social subsets intersection. In the United States, Asian Americans are the racial or ethnic minority group that are growing vastly and are seen as a homogeneous group. Most people don't seem to grasp the differences between marginalized Asian ethnic groups. Asian Americans are prone to racial discrimination and being exoticized. Fijian defined discrimination in social contextual terms as actions or practices carried out by members of dominant racial or ethnic groups that have a differential and negative impact on members of subordinate racial and ethnic groups.
Moving forward to the Chapter 2, this section presents the discussion on the research design of the study, the participants, the instruments, the procedure of data gathering, and statistical treatment that will be used for accurate data analysis and interpretation. This study will describe the discriminatory behaviors experienced among the Filipino Chinese living in the Philippines during the pandemic. Research design. So our study will be quantitative in nature, wherein it gathers and analyzes data numerically. It is a descriptive research too because the purpose of the study is to describe the phenomenon, which is the discrimination against Filipino Chinese living in the Philippines during the pandemic. So according to MapCombs 2019, descriptive research is used to accurately and systematically describe a population, situation, or a phenomenon.
Participants. Convenient sampling techniques will be utilized in gathering the participants in this study. The researchers' target respondents were 100 Filipino Chinese living here in the Philippines. They are chosen as prospective participants because it would be easy to gather data from them. Due to the pandemic crisis, the researchers couldn't go to the proper and actual gathering of data. However, they decided to find the respondents on online platforms.
Research instrument. So our study will be using the Everyday Discrimination Scale. It is a standardized test frequently used tool in assessing subjective discrimination experiences, according to Gonzalez 2016. This is a 23-item questionnaire which is divided into two parts. So the first part is a 9-item questions answerable using a Likert scale ranging from almost every day to never. The second part was a follow-up question about what the individuals believes was the cause of that daily prejudice, and it is answerable by using a checklist. So the procedure takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. The Everyday Discrimination Scale reliability and estimation resulted in a single factor with a strong internal consistency, while the convergent validity was demonstrated by higher feelings of anguish, rage, and hostility as the perceived discrimination increased. So the Everyday Discrimination Scale is a good tool for analyzing experiences of the Filipino Chinese living in the Philippines.
Data gathering procedure. The researcher will post on different Filipino Chinese Facebook community. It will include the statement indicating who are the needed participants, the target number of participants, who will conduct a survey, inform what organization or school, and the link of the Google Forms to be answered by the respondent. Data like their age, gender, contact information will also be collected. Aside from answers on the Google form, at the end of the study, a copy of the findings will be mailed to the respondent contact details.
So now let's proceed to data analysis. Once the data has been collected, descriptive data will be calculated next. Frequency statistics will be utilized as it will count the number of times that each variable occurs. Frequency tables and bar charts will be employed to interpret the frequencies in each category. Percentage will be utilized too. Percentage is calculated by taking the frequency in the category divided by the total number of respondents and then multiplying it by 100%. Measures of central tendency will be used, such as the mean and mode. By using mode, the researchers will be able to determine which discriminatory behaviors occur the most frequently in each category, like age, gender, and socioeconomic status. Finding the mean will give one number that represents the entire set of scores.